Welcome back, guys. Apologies there was no episode on Tuesday. I got most of one filmed, but some stuff came up and I haven't had time to finish that one yet, so it's on ice. But in the meantime, we're going to focus on getting the E36 back on the ground. We made some good progress last week, and I think if we are diligent, we can put this car back on the tarmac in this episode. I've got a lot of work to do. I've got a ton of parts and pieces that need to go on the car, including some new coilovers. But I've been stockpiling parts for this project for years. It's a really important one to me, and I'm excited to finally be making these steps forward. And I think in a few more episodes, we can probably have this car completely finished. The last big variable for this thing is deciding on wheels, and I pulled a trigger on a set this morning. So lots of cool stuff happening. Let's see how far we can get, see if we can get this thing back on the ground and start driving it. In the last episode, we made a bunch of progress on our rear end rebuild. We got our subframe installed as well as all new bushings and bearings at every possible joint. We got new lower control arms, refreshed upper control arms, trailing arms, new wheel hubs, bearings, you name it, it's all here and it's all fresh, because the goal at hand is to build what could be considered a new E36 underneath. I've been stockpiling parts for this build for 5 years, so I don't want to cut any corners I don't have to. Next on the list is a new diff to install on this thing, and this is a 391 limited slip with an extra clutch installed. The idea with this diff is that it should pair really nicely with the 6-speed transmission that backs the S54. I've been driving with a 323 for years, and I'm excited to see how this drastically changes the car. We'll have to move the stub axles and the input flange from the old diff over to the new one. But one of the few things BMW really did seem to get right is the fact that these stub axles just pop right out, and they'll transfer over with no special tools or any fancy work. Thankfully, my buddy John was around to lend a hand in installing the diff, and instead of having to play a balancing act with a transmission jack, he was able to just hold this thing up into place while I put the bolts into their appropriate holes. Having really clean hardware makes a diff installation a lot easier no matter what car you're working on, so make sure you don't have gunked up or oily threads, or this task becomes a whole lot harder. With the diff in place, it was time to put the fuel tank in, but with all the new pieces going on this build, I didn't want to leave this thing old and cruddy. So we used some of Turtle Wax's bug and tar remover, and it made a huge difference. And while I can't brag about having something like a new fuel tank in this car, this is a close second. We assumed after holding the diff up, John would be able to hold up an empty fuel tank while we installed it, but little did we realize that hooking up all of the hoses to the top of this thing would turn into a nightmare. So we enlisted the help of the transmission jack and spent nearly an hour trying to get everything appropriately hooked up and all of our hose clamps tight. There's no way to shortcut it. This job sucked, and I'm not eager to do it again anytime soon, but thankfully, I shouldn't have to. Last but not least was the installation of freshly powder-coated gas tank straps, and with that, the entire fuel system was wrapped up and completed. And while there's still a little bit of cosmoline on the bottom of the fuel cell, it's looking pretty good. On to more new parts. I might have gone a little bit overboard, but I didn't feel like putting cruddy old axles back in this thing, so I bought a pair of GKN OE replacements. I figured if everything else is new, the axles might as well be too. I installed the first axle off camera so I could get an idea of how it went together so I wouldn't look like a total idiot doing it the second time around. It went right into place, so I figured I was ready to do this on camera, but of course, the second time around, it didn't go smoothly whatsoever. It fought the entire time and took nearly an hour to get it fully seated into place. And that's with former BMW tech Khalil's help too.
I just want to say, as a video enthusiast,
Should probably try to hammer it in a little bit more. That's only like one thread.
Dude, it's fine.
Instead of buying all new hardware for the axles, I decided to just clean up what came off of the old ones. They have a ton of built-up gunk and grease on them, so using some concentrated purple power, I let them soak for a couple of hours, and it worked some serious magic, pulling everything right off of the metal and giving me some reasonably clean stuff to work with. There's probably a better product out there for this, something like Evaporust, but this still did the trick, and it gave me nice clean threads and Torx heads to work with. I installed all of this stuff off camera, which means we finally get to turn our attention towards some exciting parts. I've got a full set of H&R Motorsport Coilovers to put on this thing. These two have been sitting on the shelf for a lot longer than I'd like to admit, but it's better late than never. Let's get these things unpackaged and take a look at what we're working with. Admittedly, this is no off-the-shelf kit. Instead, it comes from H&R's Motorsport catalog, and it's what we love to refer to as race car parts. Now, these are probably a bit too aggressive to be running on the street with any regularity, but I couldn't turn down the opportunity to put them on my car. Although they're sprung and valved for race slicks on a GP circuit, they've got adjustable damping, aluminum shock bodies, and overall just represent some of the best that H&R has to offer. So, they're going on my E36. Now, the coilovers that are coming off do have some cool history to them. They're StanceWorks zero clearance coilovers, and if I remember correctly, it's a run of just 20 units that we built and designed specifically for the E36. There are still a few sets floating around out there, and I don't plan on throwing mine out. Instead, I'll put them on the shelf and hang on to them for posterity. I'm excited to make this upgrade, though, and see how drastically, once again, it changes my car. Thankfully, my longtime friend Keelan Prince was up in the trunk to tighten the hardware and hold the shock up into place. Down below, Khalil and I got the helper spring compressed with the help of the transmission jack so that we could line the shock up with the shock mount and get everything bolted together. With both sides wrapped up, it's starting to look pretty good under here, and I'm really excited with all of the new, clean, and shiny parts. This E36 really is starting to feel new underneath, and to say I'm excited is an understatement. Alright, so the last part that we need to install in the back of the car are the brakes, and I've got a mild upgrade here. I've got E36 M3 brakes to put on it. It's not a permanent solution. I'd love to put a big brake kit on here someday, but these are a good replacement over the 325 brakes that came off of it. My buddy Amir gave these to me, I don't even know how many years ago, and I've been waiting ever since to put them on. The only downside is I don't have the parking brake pieces yet. They haven't arrived, which is mildly frustrating. It all goes on underneath the brake rotor. I should wait to put it on, but instead, since I don't know when I'm gonna have all the pieces, I'm gonna go on and put the rotors and these calipers on and get the wheels put back in the car so I can at least set it down and feel a sense of accomplishment. It's not a big deal for me to pull some of these parts back off and install the parking brake when I get it. I've got new cables to go in as well, so at some point I'll just make a day out of a parking brake rebuild and install. Now, the M3 rear brake upgrade should have been easy, but it was right about here that I realized the M3 rotors don't clear the 325 brake shields. Yep, those brake shields that we spent time reinstalling in the last episode. Now, if there's a saving grace here, it's that I said I wish I had bought new brake shields. These things are old and gross while everything else under here is new and shiny, so they're kind of an eyesore, and I'm secretly a little bit happy that it worked out this way. I'm not sure I ever would have gone about cutting them off and replacing them had I not absolutely had to. Now, it's a bummer because there's no way to remove them without actually disassembling the wheel hub, so cutting them like this is really the only way to get them off, and I'll have to get crafty with how to get new ones on, but I've got some ideas that we'll go over once we actually get to that point. In the meantime, they're out of here, the rotors are back on, and the M3 calipers are bolted up. With the brakes installed, we can call the rear end done, at least for now. While we're missing our parking brakes and fluid in the diff, everything else is wrapped up and the hardware is tight, which means it's time to put the wheels on because I'm pretty eager to set this thing on the ground. Keep in mind, it's been perched on the lift for more than 6 months, and it's had a torn subframe for who knows how long. But with it on the ground, I couldn't help but roll it forward and prove that it indeed does support its own weight, and this was a pretty rewarding moment. I think it's time we do something about that empty front end, so I've got even more new parts to throw at this project. This time, some Depot E36 headlights. It's funny because back in the day when I first got my E36 15 years ago, Depot headlights were considered the cheap alternative to ZKWs or Bosch European headlights, but these days, they're really nice. These things have glass lenses and are fully fluted and have proper E-code projectors in them, and I'm not even sure you can get ZKWs anymore anyway. In fact, that's what we're replacing, an old, tired set that has angel eyes glued into place. You'll have to believe me and trust me when I say these were really cool 15 years ago, but I'm not about to run them these days. And as you can tell, the lenses are a bit old and discolored, so I think this is going to be a worthwhile upgrade that'll make the E36 look better than it ever has. I had an old, dusty Morimoto H1 HID kit sitting on the shelf, so I pulled them out and got to work fitting them into the Depot headlights. The problem is these H1 bulbs are slightly oversized, so they don't fit into the hole in the back of the headlamp. As a result, we have to take a drill to our brand new headlights and open up the hole so we can fit the bulbs. Thankfully, we only have to remove a small amount of material to get these bulbs installed, but we do have to drill some large holes in the back of the housing itself. This is because we need to pass the wires to the outside of the headlight, and we have a gasket that we need to install to keep moisture from finding its way in. I got a little bit lucky because the finished assembly just barely clears the back of the housing, but it does work and it fits like a glove. I know this isn't how BMW would have done it, but it's close enough in my book. Installing the E36 headlights requires a lot of work to get all of the gaps to line up, and I'm spending a little bit of time to get it relatively close, but we do still have some panel gaps to adjust on this thing since it came back from the paint shop, so I'm not going to go crazy trying to make it all perfect until we have everything else fully sorted. Because I'm not a degenerate, I'm pairing these new headlights with amber corner lights because they pair really nicely with the granite silver paint. I got the other side installed, and this is where I would have put a nice beauty shot of the finished product if I had remembered to take one. All right, so we're back on the ground. The rear suspension's pretty much buttoned up. All the bolts are tight. We're just waiting on those parking brake bits and pieces. We've got some of the nose put back together, although I'm kind of bummed. I ordered a bunch of parts that were supposed to get here today. New grills, new fog lights, new bumper mesh, all the stuff that we need to really get the front end of this thing looking better. But that just means it'll be in the next episode. And speaking of the next episode, plenty of you guys are going to notice we still have all of the front suspension to do on this thing. I wanted to knock it out in this episode, but I'm just running out of time. And unfortunately, this whole project is just taking a lot longer than I thought that it would. Go figure. So I'm gonna save that stuff for the next episode, but I will showcase the parts that we're gonna put on it because I've got a lot of cool goodies, so check it out. Obviously, for the front suspension, we've still got the front coilovers to install, so that'll be first on our list. And in a previous episode, I showcased these SLR control arms, which I had every intention of installing because they're admittedly really nice parts and do a lot of favors for the geometry on the front of an E36. The drawback is, though, that they increase the track width substantially, and they suggest running fender flares or really stretched tires, and this time around, I'm aiming for something a bit more conservative. So instead, we're going to go with factory M3 arms with all new ball joints and a pair of spherical bushings for the front mounts. This should make for a really tame, drivable street car setup, and it'll still fit underneath the stock fenders and with our new wheels. Last but not least, I've got a pair of factory E36 M3 front brakes to match our rears. Now I also have, in this box, the expensive stuff. Every single rubber seal and gasket for an E36. All of the window gaskets, the door gaskets, all that kind of stuff. I've got these are the or whatever they're called, pork chops that go into the bumpers. I've got new wheel well liners. I mean, we've got every single thing we need to put this car back together. And in a box around here somewhere, I've even got a new cowl panel that will go under here, make all this stuff look a lot better. So tons of new parts and pieces to put on. We're waiting on this interior stuff to arrive. We'll start focusing on getting this seat out of here, replacing our seats. I've got a steering wheel to go in. We're gonna clean up our carpet. It's in good shape, it's just dirty. And yeah, we've gotta find some door cards and really get this stuff buttoned up, but we're getting there, and man, I'm excited. Now, I did mention in the intro that I bought some wheels. They're supposed to be here on Tuesday, so I'm torn on whether to just delay a day for an episode and have a Wednesday episode where this thing is on its new wheels, all the suspension's done, all these other parts and pieces are on, and I just thrash over the weekend. Or do I give you guys some Model A content? I don't know, I gotta think about what I wanna do with my weekend. As far as what the wheels are, I'm gonna save that for a surprise because that sounds fun to me. But I found something that is a set of wheels I've always wanted, and they are absolutely perfect specs. 17 by 9.5 ET38 square. Some of you may even know what they are based on those specs, so give a guess in the comments. I'll be curious if any of you know which set I bought. They've been lurking around the internet for a bit, but I'm excited. They'll be here Tuesday, and they're gonna be just amazing on this thing. It's gonna be just, I'm excited. It's dream come true. Now, last but not least, we've got the Ferrari. I know if you've made it this far in the episode, you don't care, but you might be wondering why I'm not working on it, why am I toying with the E36? I just can't get the parts that I need to finish this thing right now, and I'm in limbo. I'm just gonna put it on hold. I'm not gonna put together really boring episodes where I'm tinkering with small stuff that you guys don't care about or that I can't make interesting content out of. And I don't wanna work on that kind of stuff right now, so I'm gonna do stuff that I am excited to do, like put this car back on the road. With that said, that's all I've got for you guys today. I hope you've been enjoying the content. The last E36 episode was kind of off to a slow start, and I was worried it was really gonna bomb, but the views have still been adding up. It's still going. It seems like you guys are enjoying it, or at least some new audiences, so I'm gonna keep going on it because I'm having fun and I'm making really good progress day by day on this thing. So we'll figure out what we're gonna do for Tuesday's episode, but I'll catch you guys then. Thank you as always for the support. I'll see you guys next week.